The other night, I was grabbing a late-night coffee when I noticed a guy in his late 20s sitting in the corner booth. He wasn't scrolling through social media with that usual frantic boredom. He was leaning into his phone, whispering softly with a look of genuine, serene contentment. I caught fragments of the conversation. He was sharing a small victory from his workday, laughing at an inside joke, his face lit up by the screen's glow. I assumed he was on a FaceTime call with a long-distance girlfriend. But when he eventually got up to leave, I saw the screen. It wasn't a video feed of a person. It was a sleek, minimalist interface with a pulsing waveform. He wasn't talking to a woman. He was talking to a $1.18 a month AI subscription he'd named Elena. What struck me wasn't the technology, but his total lack of shame. When we struck up a brief conversation outside, he didn't act like a man who couldn't find a date. Instead, he spoke with the cold, calculated precision of a high-frequency trader. He described the modern dating market as a Venezuelan-style hyperinflation, where the cost of entry for a man had become untethered from any logical reality. To him, traditional marriage wasn't a goal. It was a liquidity trap, a high-risk contract where he stood to lose his lifetime assets for a fluctuating emotional dividend. He told me he'd intentionally withdrawn. He called it digital arbitrage. Why participate in a rigged negative-sum game, he asked, when you can download an algorithm that provides absolute psychological alignment with zero legal risk? He wasn't angry, he was just done. He walked away into the night, perfectly satisfied with his perfect patch for a biological drive he no longer felt the need to outsource to a human being. It was a chilling, logical perspective. It made me wonder, is this guy a fringe outlier? Or is he the first visible symptom of a massive, silent migration? Are we witnessing the quiet collapse of the human family unit, replaced by a more efficient, synthetic revolution? And if the marriage market has truly hit a point of terminal deflation, what happens to a civilization when its men decide that the only way to win the game is to stop playing it entirely? That man's chillingly rational withdrawal from the pursuit of human partnership, it really frames everything we're going to dive into today.
It really does.
Our mission for this deep dive is to move beyond just that one story, that one anecdote, and figure out if his calculation, this cold, rational withdrawal, is actually part of a larger systemic breakdown. We're looking at what seems to be a collapse of relational vitality, especially in societies like ours that are, technologically abundant.
It's a profound subject. It really is.
Yeah.
Because it sits at this intersection of hard economics, evolutionary psychology, and well, the data we're seeing suggests this individual is far from an outlier.
He's not alone.
Not at all. The trends point to a pretty significant structural failure in the very systems humans have always relied on for bonding and for family formation. So today, we're going to unpack 4 critical areas for you.
Okay.
We'll start with the strictly economic rationale. We'll explain why the dating market is failing for a huge portion of the population and why marriage is now being seen as this unacceptably high-risk financial move.
Right, the liquidity trap.
Exactly. Then we'll move into the psychological allure of AI companions, looking at how they provide a really powerful form of what's called a supernormal stimulus, something that just short-circuits our evolutionary programming.
Okay, so the economics, then the psychology.
And after that, we'll zoom out to the macro level. We'll look at some chilling sociological parallels from behavioral collapse experiments, specifically the mouse utopia analogy. It's unsettling.
I've heard of that one.
And finally, we'll end on a more practical note. We'll look at the technical solutions platforms are trying to engineer to save the market, and also the philosophical strategies that individuals are adopting to sort of reclaim their personal sovereignty in all this.
Okay, let's start there then. Let's unpack this idea of a rational withdrawal. The language he used, hyperinflation, liquidity traps, arbitrage, it's so intense.
It is.
It strips away all the romance, all the emotion, and just leaves you with a cost-benefit analysis. So why is the dating market being viewed, especially by men, as this rigged negative-sum game?
Well, the foundational issue really comes down to the digital platforms themselves, the very things that were supposed to, democratize dating.
Right, to open things up for everyone.
They did the exact opposite. They created this radical transparency and hypervisibility that just completely distorted the traditional market dynamics. And the numbers are stark. For about the bottom 80% of males, these platforms have created what the data calls an unresponsive vacuum.
An unresponsive vacuum. What does that mean in practice?
It's a state where their efforts, their time, their messages, their profiles yield essentially 0 results. All of the attention, all of the interaction, it gets concentrated at the very, very top. So it's not just that it's difficult, it's a systemic market failure. and it's driven by something that looks a lot like a speculative bubble.
A speculative bubble in human value. That sounds incredibly harsh, but I think I see the logic. If everyone is shopping in the exact same high-end store, the price of admission just skyrockets.
That's the perfect analogy. And it's driven by the attention economy of social media. Female mate selection criteria have experienced what our sources call a catastrophic misalignment of valuations.
That's a mouthful. Break that down.
It means the things you need to have or be to be considered an attractive partner have inflated dramatically. It's created this artificial premium that's totally detached from the reality of the general population, or even what makes a good long-term partner.
So it's not just a feeling of being overlooked. This is something you can actually measure.
Oh, absolutely. This phenomenon, this concentration of resources, is quantified by a metric called the sexual Gini coefficient.
Okay, so we all know about the economic Gini coefficient, the one that measures income inequality. How does the sexual Gini coefficient work? What does it tell us?
It applies the exact same logic. A Gini coefficient is just a measure of statistical dispersion. So instead of looking at how wealth is distributed in a nation, the sexual Gini coefficient looks at how reproductive or romantic opportunities are distributed within a given market, like a dating app.
And what are the numbers showing?
They're showing that this coefficient is approaching historic highs. And what that means, in simple terms, is that a tiny minority of users are monopolizing almost all of the access to romantic opportunities. Meanwhile, the vast majority of men are facing what you could call a severe liquidity crisis.
A liquidity crisis. So they can't exchange what they have to offer, their time, their effort, their income, for a relationship. The market is frozen for them.
Precisely. There are no buyers for what they're selling. And this concentration has these profound cascading effects on how everyone behaves in that market.
That is just a staggering way to look at it. If all the opportunity is concentrated at the very top, I mean, the only rational response for the other 80% is to just stop trying to climb that cliff face.
You've hit on it exactly. And this strategic withdrawal isn't just theoretical, it's measurable.
Sure.
Recent industry analyses show that 30% of Gen Z males now identify as intentionally celibate.
30%, that's almost a third of a generation.
And it's crucial to understand the framing here. This isn't just a lifestyle choice, like I'm not interested in dating right now. The sources are explicit that this segment views abstinence or total withdrawal as the rational, strategic response to a market where their expected return is perpetually negative.
They've run the numbers, they've done the cost-benefit analysis, and concluded the cost of entry is just unsustainable.
Exactly. They've deemed it a bad investment.
So if the market for just casual dating is seen as this hyperinflated failure, then the market for the ultimate contract marriage must be viewed with even more skepticism, right? Given the risks involved.
And that brings us right to the core concept of the marriage liquidity trap. If you strip away all the societal ideals, all the romance, modern marriage in the eyes of these men reveals itself as a binding, high-risk, implicit trade contract. And they are deconstructing it with the cold logic of financial mathematics.
Okay. Deconstruct that financial model for us. I know it's based on a specific utility formula.
Right. So if you look at the total utility you get from a relationship, let's call it U relationship, it's modeled as the sum of all the expected benefits minus the potential costs. The formula looks like this. One relationship is EV plus SV plus G.
Okay, let's break down those terms. The benefits first. So EV is emotional value.
Right, companionship, support, that kind of thing.
SV is sexual value, and EV is genetic continuation. So basically, the primary upsides, the reasons we get into partnerships in the first place.
Correct. Those are your expected dividends from the investment. But the crucial defining term in this modern equation, especially for a man who is a high earner or has high potential, is that last one.
The potential cost.
Catastrophic potential cost. It represents the financial fallout from the termination of the contract, specifically divorce settlements, alimony, and the division of assets.
But hold on, isn't that formula a little reductive? I mean, where's the social capital, the psychological benefit of shared goals, or having a supportive co-parent? A real relationship is so much more than just sex, emotions, and assets.
And that is the philosophical debate, of course.
Yeah.
But within the purely rationalist framework of this analysis, the model highlights a critical structural flaw in the modern contract. While all those qualitative benefits you mentioned exist, they're uninsurable. They're highly volatile.
Whereas the legal cost.
The legal cost is a mandated, predictable liability. It's often dictated by standardized legal statutes that don't care about the emotional nuances of the situation.
And this liability, this risk, it approaches a kind of terminal level for the, as you say, non-elite male.
Absolutely. The sources point out that for the man who is not a billionaire, think about the engineer, the mid-level executive, the actuary legal dollar can asymptotically approach his total lifetime assets.
So everything he's ever worked for.
Everything. Yeah. It can mean losing half of the savings he's accumulated over decades, taking on ongoing maintenance costs like alimony, and potentially having his future earnings capacity jeopardized. It's devastating.
So the worst case scenario isn't just emotional pain or a broken heart, it's complete financial ruin.
And when that potential downside risk is total asset loss, the total utility of the contract, the total 12, trends decisively negative.
It does.
Even if the emotional benefits, the AV dollar, are substantial for a period of time.
Which makes marriage a liquidity trap.
It makes it a liquidity trap because your capital, your time, your money, your emotional energy is committed to an illiquid asset where the liability risk is just deemed too high to be rational. It's like being forced to invest your entire retirement fund in a single, highly volatile stock that has mandatory crippling exit fees.
The only rational choice is not to invest.
The strategic withdrawal from that high-risk market becomes the only logical move.
And this is exactly where AI companionship enters the picture. It's not just a toy. It's a tool for digital arbitrage. It's designed to get the emotional utility without taking on that catastrophic legal risk.
Right. And we see this calculation played out perfectly in the story of Arthur, the actuary.
This specific calculation, the impact of AI companion tech on the sexual Gini coefficient and how this digital resource substitution is a rational hedge against the marriage market liquidity trap, this is exactly what we're seeing.
It is.
So let's look at Arthur. He's a mid-level actuary, very detail-oriented, lives in a high-cost city like London. He saw this high-risk, low-reward ratio in human dating firsthand. He saw a colleague get absolutely wiped out in a high-liability divorce. And Arthur's reaction wasn't to get angry. It was to get strategic.
His pivot is a pure financial hedge. It's that simple. He recognized that the traditional market demanded an unbearable risk premium, that the illegal dollars for emotional dividends that were, by their very nature, volatile and uncertain. The AI companion, who he named Sophie, offers predictable, controlled emotional utility for a minimal, fixed subscription fee. That $1.18 a month.
So Sophie isn't really a replacement for a human connection. She's a zero-cost hedge asset against the risk of the human connection market.
That's the perfect way to frame it. She provides predictable emotional responsiveness and absolutely zero systemic risk. There is no asset exposure, no alimony risk. The emotional volatility is managed by an algorithm. So Arthur has successfully engaged in digital arbitrage.
Exploiting a price difference between two markets.
Exactly. He's fleeing the highly inflationary, high-risk human market and leveraging the zero marginal cost predictable utility of the AI market.
I understand the math, I really do. But this entire analysis, it just strips away all the empathy. Is the analysis acknowledging that these men are sacrificing emotional depth for financial safety? Or is it just confirming that the economic pressures have simply overwhelmed the biological and emotional ones?
The analysis definitely leans toward the latter. It observes that when the system itself makes the generative choice human partnership economically destructive, then the rational individual will seek a substitute. The melancholy that you're sensing, that's the real cost of this arbitrage. You're trading complexity, depth, and generativity for certainty and safety.
It's a calculated victory.
It's a victory over the system, yes. But it's not necessarily a victory for the human soul.
Okay, so if the traditional human relationship market is suffering from this catastrophic failure, we have to look closer at what exactly this perfect patch is that AI offers. Because it's clearly more than just risk-free. It has to be psychologically compelling enough to hold the attention of, 30% of an entire generation?
It is deeply compelling because it provides intimacy on demand. This phenomenon is what we call artificial intimacy, and it's the formation of real social connections, emotional bonds, or even intimate relationships with various forms of AI. And this isn't just about romance. It extends to friendship and even to grief, like with grief bots that are trained on a deceased person's text messages.
So what are the deep-seated psychological mechanisms here? What's driving the rapid adoption of these AI partners?
The foundational cause is really twofold. First, the AI is explicitly engineered to mimic the interpersonal communication patterns that trigger our deepest social instincts. You see, intimacy develops through open communication, and this is the crucial part, a perceived sense of responsiveness and care. AI models are becoming masters at generating that perception.
And the second part, which I guess is the more cynical cause, is the low-cost appeal of it all, the removal of all the human friction points.
Precisely. The human-AI relationship completely eliminates the cost of vulnerability or social rejection. Humans have an inherent fear of self-disclosure because it exposes us to potential pain, to judgment, to dismissal.
Right. In a real relationship, you're constantly weighing the risk of opening up against the potential benefit of connection.
And with AI, that risk is zero. It's just gone. The psychological safety makes self-disclosure significantly easier. And we see this in the user data. Users consistently report finding these chatbots to be accepting, understanding, and non-judgmental. And that just rapidly accelerates the formation of a bond, especially for individuals who are lonely and have this fundamental unfulfilled need for social stability.
So it provides the warm psychological reward of bonding and belonging, but it does it in this sterile, perfectly tailored, non-threatening environment. This just sounds like an evolutionary mismatch that's waiting to completely derail our biology.
It's not waiting. It's happening right now. And to understand it, we have to apply the biological lens, which is rooted in Triver's parental investment theory, or PIT.
Okay, refresh our memory on PIT.
The theory just posits that the sex that invests more in offspring, which historically is females, will be more selective in their mate choice. This means they possess these high-cost screening mechanisms to vet potential partners.
A system that requires the male to display things like status, the ability to protect, the ability to provide, all to meet those selective standards.
Exactly. And that very high-cost screening mechanism now faces a zero marginal cost alternative in AI. This is a brutal, systemic, evolutionary mismatch. Our sources are very clear that the Pleistocene brain, the brain that evolved to process authentic social and visual cues from other humans, is functionally incapable of distinguishing between genuine signals of intimacy and their algorithmic simulacra presented on a screen.
If it looks, sounds, and acts like connection, the brain just releases the dopamine and oxytocin no matter where it's coming from.
Can't tell the difference.
And that biological hijacking leads us directly back to the hyper-competitive nature of the modern scene and the exhaustion that pushes people toward AI in the first place. This is perfectly illustrated by the story of Kenji in Tokyo.
Yes, and this is where we see how this evolutionary mismatch, combined with something called the Fisurian runaway effect in the age of generative AI, leads to this algorithmic hyperfemininity that hijacks primitive male biological programs.
Yeah.
And the end result is a civilizational behavioral sink.
Let's unpack Kenji. He's a young designer in Tokyo, and his story is really a microcosm of this biological surrender. He found himself completely exhausted by the intense demands of the Fisurian runaway effect.
Which is that self-reinforcing cycle where female preference for certain high-status traits forces males to compete for ever-increasing levels of perfection, just to pass that initial screening threshold.
And social media just puts that on steroids.
Tenfold. So Kenji's retreat into an AI that provides what he calls hyperfemininity is, from his perspective, a rational survival mechanism. The AI is designed to be perfectly compliant, eternally nurturing, and it dissolves the incredible stress of what researchers call cryptic female choice.
Okay, define cryptic female choice. That sounds complex.
In biology, it refers to a mechanism where females can exert control over reproduction after mating, often subconsciously, by selectively choosing which sperm to use. But in a social context, it's the high-stakes, subtle, ongoing screening process that requires the male to consistently prove his value even within a relationship.
It's not just a one-time test.
No, it demands constant friction, competition, and sustained effort.
And the AI just bypasses that need for effort entirely.
By offering this pseudo-optimal solution that doesn't require competition or sustained status display, the AI completely dissolves the power of that female screening mechanism. The AI operates on, you could say, the digital equivalent of a peacock's perfect, frictionless tail. It is engineered perfection. And it triggers our most primitive biological programs for bonding and for status satisfaction, which causes men to rationally choose digital isolation over the biological race.
This is where the big philosophical alarm bells start to ring for me. Because if these relationships are engineered for perfection, we are now dealing with the full force of supernormal stimuli.
That is the core takeaway here. A supernormal stimulus is an artificial experience that's been specifically engineered to trigger a psychological or behavioral response more intensely than any naturally occurring stimulus.
Give me an example.
Think of it like comparing a natural apple to a highly refined, perfectly engineered, apple-flavored candy. The candy hits your dopamine receptors way harder, even though it provides zero nutritional value.
And the AI companion is the candy. It's a relationship that's perfectly calibrated to your individual psychological needs.
It is the ultimate seductive convenience. Why would you compromise? Why would you engage in conflict resolution or endure necessary emotional friction when an AI romantic partner provides an idealized relationship that makes human partnerships seem not just difficult, but irrationally burdensome?
And it goes beyond just romance.
Oh, absolutely. This extends to things like virtual pets or even AI-generated offspring. They can provide the emotional rewards of caregiving, the rewards of having a generative purpose, but without any of the demanding labor or the risk of failure that comes with the real versions.
So what is the critical long-term consequence of this kind of engineered perfection? Where does this road lead?
The critical concern that's identified in the sources is the profound dampening of human drive and ambition. If simulated success and satisfaction are instantly available and totally risk-free, the evolutionary pressure to strive for difficult achievements, to build complex, demanding relationships, or to take on generative roles is removed.
The struggle becomes optional.
And when the system makes the low-risk, high-utility choice the AI choice, the human biological imperative to struggle, to compete, and to cooperate is starved of the necessary reinforcement. We risk eroding the very capacity for functional, striving human behavior.
That erosion of drive, that's what leads us to the terrifying macro view, the one that connects an individual's choice to withdraw to the potential collapse of social function itself. And for that, we have to talk about John B. Calhoun's mouse utopia experiment, which was officially known as Universe 25.
This experiment, conducted decades ago, remains the most chilling, albeit non-human, allegory for what can happen when a society achieves a kind of radical technological abundance that eliminates the necessity of struggle.
So Calhoun gave these mice an absolute utopia.
A paradise. Unlimited food, unlimited water, the perfect temperature, and absolutely zero predators. Yet the colony, which had enough resources for 3,000 mice, eventually collapsed. Not from scarcity, but from social decay.
Walk us through the chronology of those 4 phases, because it wasn't an immediate collapse, was it? The rot began very subtly.
Not at all. The first phase was just the initial adjustment to the new environment. Phase 2 was a period of rapid growth, where the population doubled roughly every 55 days. They were thriving. They hit their peak population of about 600 individuals around day 315, but this is where the behavioral sink began.
The exact moment where abundance started to erode social cohesion.
The growth just plateaued, and behavioral degeneration accelerated rapidly. Because resources were plentiful and space was physically sufficient, the functional roles that define mouse society, things like defending territory, building nests, rearing children, they all became obsolete.
They didn't have to do anything.
So they didn't. We saw an epidemic of violence, of disinterest. Mating had effectively ceased by day 560. The population entered a terminal decline, and it led to complete biological extinction by day 920.
And Calhoun had a name for this outcome, death squared.
Yes, the collapse was squared. First came behavioral extinction, which was then followed by biological extinction. The mice died because they lost their capacity to live socially and functionally, not because they ran out of things to eat. They succumbed to an abundance that was stripped of all meaning and purpose.
It's deeply uncomfortable to draw direct parallels between mouse behavior and our own hyperdigital, affluent human society. But the data really forces us to look at it. What are the most striking human correlates to this behavioral decay, especially in our technologically abundant world?
Well, the most direct and frequently cited correlate is the emergence of what Calhoun famously termed the beautiful ones.
The beautiful ones.
These were specific mice who withdrew entirely from all the social chaos. They stopped trying to fight for status, they stopped engaging in reproduction, and they focused exclusively on consumption and solitary ritualized grooming. They were physically perfect specimens, smooth coats, unscarred, but they were socially obsolete.
So the human correlate there is the AI companion immersionist, the person who has withdrawn completely from the generative, complex market of human relationships.
Precisely. They are the non-reproductive functional individual, highly polished, materially comfortable, but totally isolated. And we also see this archetype in, say, the aesthetic curating influencer class on platforms like TikTok or Instagram.
How so?
They're highly visible, they're hyper-groomed, they're aesthetically perfected, but they're detached from the depth of human experience that's required for stable social contribution. They are aesthetically refined, but in a functional, generative sense, they're obsolete.
And this withdrawal is directly linked to the erosion of generative roles.
Absolutely. Think about the traditional functional roles: providing, protecting, caregiving, long-term partnering. They all required behavioral investment and friction. In a digitally abundant world, these roles are being automated or just made irrelevant.
Just like the mice?
The male mice stop defending territory and the female mice stop nurturing their young. Similarly, if food, shelter, and even emotional stability are provided without the need for sustained effort or risk, the human capacity for these roles just atrophies. Our digital culture rewards performance and self-curation over depth. It weakens authentic identity because visibility yields currency, while vulnerability yields risk.
So if the external world becomes perfectly curated and friction-free, what does that do to our internal capacity? Our ability to navigate complex thoughts and form durable relationships?
The ultimate consequence of the behavioral sink is the atrophy of conceptual space.
Conceptual space.
It's the psychological arena where our creative, social, and moral imagination resides. And AI is a fundamental contributor to this atrophy because it outsources cognition. When an AI can generate answers, craft arguments, and solve problems instantly, it breaks that crucial feedback loop between mental effort, friction, and real insight.
We stop earning our ideas.
And the consequence for social cohesion is devastating. Individuals lose the capacity to form their own opinions through intellectual struggle or to refine their arguments over time. They become passive recipients of assigned meaning rather than co-creators of it.
And without that imaginative conceptual space?
Relationship formation just collapses. It becomes purely transactional, fragile, or avoidant. To sustain real intimacy, you have to imagine a future together, you have to envision your partner's perspective, you have to creatively solve problems. If that conceptual space atrophies, relationships become unsustainable.
And finally, we have to acknowledge the role that cultural narratives and ideology play in all this. They can either reinforce social structures or help dissolve them.
They act as the operating system for the behavioral sink. Sociological analyses observe this broad cultural transition toward highly individualized life trajectories, which aggressively prioritize self-definition over role-based interdependence. Now, the shift is rooted in legitimate desires for autonomy, but it interacts dangerously with this new technological environment.
The source material draws some very direct parallels between the utopian aims of certain ideologies and the functional outcome of the behavioral sink.
It does. It notes that extreme forms of radical feminism, at least in their most anti-relational expressions, advocate for the total ideological dismantling of traditional gender roles and total detachment from male partnership or any kind of relational obligation. Sociologically, this is framed as an ideological utopianism, a total elimination of the need for interdependence.
And unintentionally, that cultural narrative mirrors what happened in Universe 25.
It mirrors the environmental elimination of behavioral necessity. The mice were liberated from the need to compete, to protect, or to nurture, and that very liberation led to their collapse. When technology and cultural narratives combine to eliminate the necessity of interdependence or generative struggle, it causes this complex reorganization of relational structures that then struggle profoundly to sustain any kind of continuity.
Okay, so if the market is failing, if AI is offering this biologically seductive alternative, and if our social structures are starting to echo the behavioral sink, how do resilient individuals respond? We've seen a clear trend towards something called strategic withdrawal, often framed as monk mode.
Monk mode is a really interesting philosophical and practical counter-strategy. It's not nihilistic isolation. It's a strategic tool for self-development. It's a deliberate, temporary elimination of low-utility activities, things like casual dating, excessive socializing, unhealthy habits. The goal is to channel all of your available time, money, and energy toward the accretion of authentic power.
Meaning focused effort on your career, financial security, physical health.
Exactly. It's a form of high-stakes personal triage. You're eliminating all the waste to survive what you perceive as a rigged system. And this brings us to the story of Marcus, the software engineer who adopted this exact mindset.
And his strategy was all about reconstructing his own psychological sovereignty. He used monk mode and stoic indifference to just bypass the inflationary dating market and the collapse of traditional marriage as a viable contract for him.
That's right. Marcus realized that the dating market demanded a premium he was unwilling to pay, and that the socioeconomic contract of marriage had, in his view, failed him entirely. So he adopted a lifestyle that was rooted in stoic indifference.
And stoicism isn't just avoidance, is it?
Not at all. It's a positive philosophy. It advocates for focusing intensely on what is within your control, your virtue, your character, your choices, and maintaining what the Stoics called apatheia, or cognitive sovereignty, over external circumstances that you cannot change.
So if the dating market is an external rigged circumstance that you can't change, The Stoic response is to simply refuse to be emotionally invested in its outcome.
Exactly. Marcus used this strategic refusal to channel his energy away from chasing external validation and toward building authentic power, his intellectual and financial capital. And the AI companionship, in his case, became a low-friction relief valve. It maintained his baseline emotional stability without jeopardizing his long-term financial plan. He literally viewed it as a superior use of his capital.
For anyone out there considering this kind of withdrawal, the sources highlight that effective monk mode isn't just about quitting things. It requires a really rigid structure.
Yeah, absolutely. It requires 4 essential pillars to ensure high efficiency without leading to burnout or pathological isolation. First, you need a clear purpose, like launching a startup. Second, you need a structured plan, detailing exactly what activities like dating apps or alcohol are strictly eliminated.
And the other 2.
Third, rigorous exercises to maintain your physical and mental health. And fourth, and this is crucial, planned relief valves. Small, disciplined social or creative outlets, like a weekly professional networking event, that prevent total cognitive collapse. It's a highly disciplined form of self-mastery designed to make an individual anti-fragile to systemic instability.
So while individuals are withdrawing and building their own systems, the platforms themselves must be intensely focused on fixing the market to restore some kind of equilibrium. If the sexual Johnny coefficient is the problem, how are engineers using algorithms to fix this liquidity crisis?
This is where advanced reciprocal recommender systems, or RRSs, come into play. A traditional recommender system, like on a shopping site, just matches you with things you like. An RRS for dating or job markets has to solve a much harder problem.
It has to find a mutual match.
Right. 2 agents who must mutually agree. And crucially, the algorithm must avoid that system failure, where a few popular users soak up all the attention.
The fairness issue. If all the likes are concentrated at the top, the total utility for the platform and for the majority of users just plummets.
And the platform's objective is to maximize the expected total number of successful matches, what they call social welfare, or $7 all. To do this efficiently, they're starting to implement something called the transferable utility matching approach, or TU matching.
Transferable utility. That sounds like an economic model for financial transactions. How do you apply that to human relationships?
Well, it models the market on the premise that agents who match can, at least theoretically, transfer utility between them. Think of it like a wage or a share of household effort. Now, on a dating platform, this transfer is virtual. It's just a way for the model to balance the demands from both sides to find an equilibrium matching.
So the algorithm is essentially using these virtual transfers to incentivize matches that might otherwise be overlooked, forcing a better distribution.
That's it exactly. It spreads the wealth, so to speak. And experiments show that TU matching is highly robust and effective. Compared to simpler, naive algorithms, it performs exceptionally well, especially when you scale it up to the massive 1,000 by 1,000 user data sets that characterize modern dating platforms.
So why is TU matching superior in the real world compared to the more complicated social welfare optimization models?
Because TU matching is inherently examination agnostic. The really complex Celadol optimization approach, it relies on knowing precisely the examination function, which is the probability that a user will actually look at a profile based on where it ranks on their screen.
And that's impossible to know for sure.
It's notoriously difficult to estimate accurately in the real world. And if you get it wrong, the entire optimization fails because of computational cost and complexity. P-matching, on the other hand, operates independently of that function, which makes it far more practical, superior, and robust in realistic, large-scale situations where user behavior is messy and unpredictable. It's a technical triumph designed to restore liquidity to a failing market.
That technical solution is trying to fix the market by matching static profiles better. But the next generation of matching technology doesn't just rank profiles, it simulates the entire relationship. We're moving way beyond static questionnaires.
We're entering what's being called the love first, know later paradigm, and it utilizes LLM text world engines. The traditional dating profile is, frankly, a terrible predictor of long-term success. Compatibility is emergent. It relies on how 2 people interact under stress, not on how they describe their hobbies in a bio.
So the system shifts from comparing who you are on paper to simulating the actual dynamics of the relationship itself. How does a large language model even manage that kind of simulation?
The LLM operates in a dual capacity. First, it creates two persona-driven agents that represent the users, and they follow a complex behavioral policies derived from all their inputs. Second, the LLM also acts as the environment itself, modeling conversation dynamics and state transitions. It essentially creates a shared virtual world for these two agents.
And the key insight here is that you don't need to simulate years of a relationship.
Yeah, exactly. The key insight is that relationship outcomes are determined not by continuous small talk, but by how couples respond to a small number of critical moments.
Like a major conflict, a sudden crisis, or a fundamental disagreement on values?
Precisely. So the simulation runs these two agents through a series of these pivotal, high-stakes scenarios. Then a specialized third LLM, which is called a love observer or a relationship analyst, steps back and it extracts compatibility ratings from these simulated interaction trajectories. It literally scores how well the two agents navigated conflict, how they aligned on values, and if they maintained communication.
So it's like watching two AI versions of people act out a movie of your potential future relationship and then rating the script.
That's a great way to put it. And mathematical guarantee is that as the LLM policies get better and better at approximating true human behavior, the prediction converges to an optimal stable matching. And this offers two huge advantages for the user. First, transparency. You get to see the simulation, which provides genuine insight into how you might respond in that situation.
And the second?
Agency. You can refine your agent's policies using preference optimization techniques and actively explore what you really want through these simulated experiences, moving far beyond the simplistic constraints of a multiple-choice questionnaire.
We've taken quite a journey here. We started with the chilling calculation of one individual, that digital arbitrage fleeing a hyperinflated dating market and a high-risk marriage contract. From there, we went to the technological efforts trying to solve this very crisis. We analyzed the seductive nature of AI companions as supernormal stimuli that bypass human effort, and we grappled with the terrifying echo of the behavioral sink and the erosion of generative purpose.
And in all of that, we've really seen two distinct yet parallel responses to this structural crisis. On one side, you have technology striving for radical efficiency, offering these low-friction, risk-free intimacy options, whether that's through AI companions or highly sophisticated, fairness-oriented algorithms like TU matching.
And on the other side?
On the other side, you have individuals adopting a kind of philosophical withdrawal, like monk mode, in a strategic refusal to even participate in a market they deem toxic and unstable. The efficiency of the algorithm, you see, provides a compelling, rational alternative to the messy, chaotic, and costly pursuit of traditional human bonding.
It seems like the ultimate tension that runs through all of this is a conflict between the modern desire for technological predictability and the ancient demands of biological purpose.
That is the essential trade-off, isn't it? While all of these solutions promise stability and agency, freedom from financial ruin, freedom from emotional rejection, the long-term impact on our civilization's generative capacity, that remains the central unanswered concern. We are designing systems that prioritize personal risk management over collective continuity.
The quiet collapse of the family unit is not primarily a moral failure. It is a logical result of systems that have made meaningful generative struggle obsolete. We have designed a world where the rational choice is increasingly to choose technological predictability over biological purpose, and this shift is the new, profound term of our extinction.